Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. We are really excited to be releasing the latest economic impact report of Maine's Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credits. This program incentivizes businesses and real estate owners and developers to rehabilitate and reuse historic buildings throughout Maine for income producing uses. The tax credit encourages investment in downtown areas to spur revitalization and to create affordable housing by providing a mechanism to allow a building owner or a developer to receive a state tax credit of 25% or 34% if they're doing affordable housing. And that's a percentage of the cost of historic improvements for the rehabilitation and reuse of a building that is a certified historic structure. So when this is coupled with the federal rehabilitation tax credit of 20%, this ensures that really challenging projects are financially viable. From 2009 to 2019, 106 projects were certified and placed in service in Maine, and there are another 59 in various stages of approval. So why are we talking about this now? Well, we are excited to showcase and support what we see as an incredible economic development tool and provide a high level of accountability for the program. Last year, the legislature extended the tax credit program, and we look forward to continuing to work with our leadership to expand that extension. And as Maine is looking to develop a much more resilient response to climate change, further the goals of the state economic plan, and stabilize Maine's economy as a result of the ongoing pandemic, we see this as an opportune time to showcase the continued benefit of this credit. So next, I'd like to turn it over to Greg Paxton, who is the Executive Director of Maine Preservation. Greg, you're on mute.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. This is a really exciting study to undertake. There have been two prior economic impact studies, but this one really kind of takes us over the top, you might say. First of all, there are a whole slew of fiscal impacts that emerge from the Historic Tax Credit program. Many of the buildings that are engaged in this program have been vacant or largely vacant, and almost all have been underutilized. And they're generally located in downtown areas or in town areas. Oftentimes, they've been dragging down the real estate market around them, and when the projects are finished, suddenly they're raising the level of all the buildings around them. There are a great deal of positive taxes that occur as a result of these projects, and they include, of course, income tax and sales tax paid during the construction period, but also ongoing property taxes. And what's happened over the course of the years since 2008, when the credit was drastically changed, the state credit, these property taxes are building up. And as a result, this study shows that as of about 2016, this program began to be a profit center for the taxpayers of Maine. Namely, that there have been more taxes collected using this program on an annual basis than are paid out since 2016. So that's a very exciting development that this particular study report shows. This is exactly what a tax incentive should be doing. It's not a check the box kind of system. Instead, you have to invest all your money in the project ahead of time, and then and only then are you approved to begin to collect the historic tax credit. It's reviewed by 2 state agencies and 2 federal agencies before these credits are given out. And then finally, in terms of highlights on the fiscal impact, out-of-state money flows into Maine as a result of this credit. First of all, federal tax credits are associated with almost all the projects, all but the very smallest projects, and the relatively few of those. So the other element is often there are out-of-state investors who are putting money into these projects. And yet the vast majority of the projects are owned by Mainers. So this is exactly how we build up our economy. Mainly we use out-of-state money to bring it into Maine and then employ it in Maine by Mainers. I'd now like to turn it over to John Egan from CEI.
Thanks, Greg. One of the compelling reasons for CEI to participate in the State Historic Tax Credit is the opportunity to enhance housing units, and in particular affordable housing units. As a mission-driven organization, we're focused on finding ways to amplify and expand affordable rental housing across Maine, not just in the communities that are in the newspaper every day, but affordable housing is an issue that many communities across the state are wrestling with. The data shows in the report that almost 2,000 rental units have been produced or preserved as a result of the historic tax credit, and close to 1,300, a little over 1,300 of those are affordable units. And that's precisely why CEI is investing in these projects and why we participate in the tax credit. The housing units remain affordable for an extended period of time, not just for the first 5 years. The other housing units that are created are often in desperate need for workforce in the communities to respond to the increase in job opportunities that are coming from these projects. One other consideration for CEI to make its investment and why the tax credit is successful is that the projects can range all the way up to the large mills, for instance, that are being developed in Lewiston and in Biddeford, but it also can be effective all the way down to the small 3-story, 50-foot wide building that has a commercial space on the first floor and perhaps just 2 apartments up above. And we see these projects in all kinds of different downtown places around the state of Maine. And the tax credit allows developers to really get at those projects on a small scale where otherwise the construction might not be feasible. Those building owners are then able to leverage outside equity investment instead of having to come out of their own pocket in order to accomplish those very successful small scale but contagious downtown projects that are leading to revitalization of their community. The other exciting part of the historic tax credit is the opportunity that we get to work with a diversity of building owners. In addition to larger developers who may be taking on hotels or large office buildings, we get to work with a diversity of small scale owners that otherwise are probably still trying to figure out how to cover the costs of renovating their building. Between life safety codes and building codes and being able to get to those second and third floors, the tax credit can often mean the difference between a project working or not working. It's been extremely successful, and as Greg has said, it's exactly what a tax incentive is supposed to be doing, which is to spur activity in downtown and bring in outside money and outside capital to get things going. Nancy?
Thank you, John. I'm going to look at this a little bit more broadly with the economic impact, looking at jobs and dollars invested in Maine. When we look at direct dollars invested for qualified and overall construction costs, it's $525 million since 2007. 85% of that is in the historic portions of the program, but the other 15% is non-historic work such as new construction required or landscaping to complete the project. The direct jobs, I think, is one of the most exciting parts of this tax credit because the proportion of investment that goes into professional trades versus purchasing material is much higher for this rehab, and the job creation numbers show it. For the construction spending alone, this tax credit has generated 200 to 700 full-time equivalent jobs annually for the past decade. Looking at the indirect jobs and dollars, this is interesting too. There are nearly 700 full-time year-round jobs that have been generated only by those businesses in these buildings that otherwise would have located out of state. And those 700 jobs generate $13 million per year in ongoing income for families in Maine's communities. Also interesting to note is that for every dollar of sales generated by businesses in historic tax credit buildings, another $60 flowed to Maine vendors and employees, really magnifying the economic impact of the state historic tax credit projects. Looking more broadly at downtown vitality, John Egan made reference to this, that when one historic building is brought back to life, there's a ripple effect that is just phenomenal. There's more energy in the one building and then the one next to it and then beyond that, so that you have housing, which creates more demand for retail and hospitality, more commercial, more places for people to work in these towns. And we're seeing this happen across the state. It's from Biddeford to Dover-Foxcroft, from Lewiston and Rumford to Eastport. This really is a statewide success story that we're eager to share with everyone. And with that, I'll bring back Sarah to manage any questions and anything that we may have missed.
Great, thank you so much, Nancy. So I just want to sum up really quickly what you've all heard today. So since 2008, the Maine Historic Tax Credit has sustained the construction industry, not only through the Great Recession, but through this pandemic as well. It's delivered substantial social impacts by fostering affordable and market rate housing and catalyzed significant business development and job creation, as you've heard from Nancy. So while bringing considerable federal dollars to Maine, this credit has also repurposed an assortment of significant but vacant and underutilized and deteriorated buildings. Working in small and large communities around the state, these projects are concentrated primarily around downtown areas, revitalizing these communities and enhancing their quality of place. And finally, as Greg mentioned, the precipitous rise in property taxes combined with income and sales tax has resulted in a net positive gain for Maine taxpayers. So thank you very much. We will accept questions. We will be sending out this recording in an email following this as well.
I have a question.
Excellent, Maureen, yes.
Maureen, should I put my video on or can you guys just deal with it?
Totally
Sure.
Up to you.
I'll leave it off. I'm still
Please do.
in morning mode.
Got it.
The question is, the invitation mentioned that all the groups involved in this are urging the state legislature to pay attention to this, and you did mention an extension. So how long is the extension for? What is the status in the legislature? And are there indications the legislature is as happy as you all are with this program and that it will be extended further?
That's great, thank you, Maureen. I'm actually gonna bring in Elizabeth Frazier to answer that question specifically about the legislature. Elizabeth, are you there?
I am sorry, I had to take myself off.
No, no worries.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, did someone already tell how long the extension does go for?
No.
No.
So the extension will go until 2025. It was originally set to expire in 2023, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a 2 full-year extension. Of course, we did, I believe, originally ask for a 15-year extension, but we were actually very happy to get the 2 years because in addition to the 2-year extension, the legislature tweaked the language a little bit to allow essentially projects to start their projects a little bit later to make it a little bit easier for this credit to kind of continue to be useful to these projects right up until it expires. So that's the situation at the legislature currently. And then I can't recall, did you ask about the review process?
Yeah, just when, I mean, is there ongoing, now I can't kind of remember how I asked it, but
I think
what's its status as far, when do you have to, I guess, even though it's till 2025, when do you have to get the ball rolling on renewing it, and how long an extension are you looking for? And does this just have to be continually extended?
Great question. So you know, when it needs to be extended is sort of a product of preference. You know, technically we don't need to extend it until, you know, the year before it's going to expire approximately, but that really does a disservice to projects that are in the pipeline. So in order to keep projects in the pipeline able to plan and moving forward and bring new ones in, we look to extend it a couple of years before it's set to expire, which is why we look to do it this year in 2020 when it was set to expire in 2023. So that's the rationale for sort of when we seek a continuation. Our long-term goal would, of course, be to have this be never to sunset. So tax credit in perpetuity, which is how many of them are set up, of course. It can always be repealed down the road, but that's our long-term goal. In the meantime, we are sort of along for the ride with an OPEGA process to review the credit as part of their sort of statutory mandate to review all state tax expenditures on a schedule. It's getting what's called a full tax expenditure review, which just means it's going to go through the very lengthy process of OPEGA will set parameters and then do field work and then come up with a report, which they will then present to the Government Oversight Committee, which we think will happen next year. We think OPEGA will present that report to Government Oversight sometime next year. And then once we have that report in hand, and once we see how much it supports the historic tax credit and how impactful the credit has been to the state, as you can see from our own research on this, we hope to then seek a longer term extension, probably 15 years, you know, depending on, we take the temperature, obviously, if there's a groundswell of support, we may go for longer or we may go for in perpetuity. But we will, of course, always take what we can get as we continue to push for education around how impactful this is to the state's economy.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
And I have I do have another question.
Sure.
And I don't know if any of you would actually know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When you say that it's turned the corner, so it's now making money for the state, how normal is that for a tax credit program? Is that the goal of all tax credit programs, or is that kind of the icing on the cake when compared to all the other things, all the other benefits of it? Can somebody elaborate on that a little?
Sure. Does anyone in particular want to take that, or?
I can take it.
Okay.
I don't know that it's common. I wouldn't say that it's common. I would say it's certainly possible that other tax credit programs have ultimately had a similar result, although I frankly can't think of any off the top of my head. So I think it's exceptional in that regard. I wouldn't say it's the goal of all tax credit programs. I think it's certainly, as you said, icing on the cake. Most tax credit programs, the goal is either to incentivize outside capital, level the playing field sometimes, bring in new technologies, incentivize economies that we might not otherwise have. So they have a variety of purposes. With this type of credit, which is pretty squarely aimed at economic development, I think the fact that it does make the state money is not only proof of how effectively structured it is, but also proof that Maine can and should restore its historic properties, both for its legacy and also to help drive money to the state. And I think that's unique to this credit. I'd welcome someone else jumping in. I just can't think of any off the top of my head.
Well,
I
was going to say, I wanted to pivot a little bit from that too, now that we're talking more broadly about the goal of the tax credit. Something that Sarah mentioned in the intro that wasn't part of the report, because the report focuses on the economic impact, but the implications for climate change, as the Climate Council is getting their recommendations ready to go, the embedded carbon in these buildings that is being repurposed has phenomenal potential. If you look at manufacturing and transportation of new materials versus using what's already there, in addition to not having to do demolition on the building. It's just, this is, I think, a right time to talk about more broadly what the goals are, that there are, you know, there's economic, there's environmental, and for the community, as well as fiscal benefits, both at the municipal and state level. So I saw that as an opportunity to mention another amazing benefit that I don't think was part of the conversation back in 2008 when the state tax credit was expanded significantly to what it is now.
It wasn't, and actually,
Yeah.
I want to follow up on what Nancy just said, because I think Maine is going through a period of rethinking tax expenditures and their effectiveness, particularly as we turn the corner. You know, the governor has a 10-year economic development plan, of course, subject to change, obviously, from COVID, but I think the idea will still be, what's Maine's new economy and how do we get there? And while a lot of the credits that we have on the books maybe aren't going to get us there, or they're not quite as effective for this new economy, this one is absolutely geared at this, and makes it for a great first step for her administration to kind of come behind this and move forward. So I think this one is really well poised to be almost a template for others as we go forward.
Yeah,
And,
thanks, Elizabeth.
Sorry. I was just going to say two additional points about that. And one is that if you demolish a building and rebuild, it'll take you 40 to 50 years, even if you build a net zero building, to get back to even. And so we've really been underplaying the value from an ecological standpoint of these historic buildings. And the second point is that actually the preservation standards makes you keep the materials that are in the building as much as possible. And these, it turns out, are very durable materials. I mean, old growth wood, for example, which we just can't replace anymore. So that not only are the materials themselves have a lot of embedded carbon, but they last longer in and of themselves. So these preservation standards really are environmental standards, if you will, or climate change standards that work very well together.
Right.
Great, thank you, Greg. Yeah, and I'll just say, Maureen, to your question too, there's more than 30 states that have historic tax credit programs. And Maine's is pretty unique and really has been showcased quite a few times nationally as a program that is functioning exceptionally well, not only because it has such a great return for the state, but also because, you know, as everyone has alluded to, it helps communities preserve their assets and what it makes them unique. And that in turn drives everyone's quality of life up. It attracts visitors. It helps sustain a stable economy. It's just, it sort of gets the ball rolling on a lot of different benefits, including all of the things we talked about regarding climate change as well.
And I would think Maine would be in some ways not unique, but one of the states geared toward that, since we have an abundance of buildings that are quite old and haven't been torn down, probably because it cost too much back in the past to tear them down or something. But so Maine's kind of more in a position, I would think, to take advantage of a program like this, right, than a lot of states would be.
Yes, we
Yes.
have a lot of downtowns with a predominance of historic buildings in their building stock. So yeah, even though the credit's been going very successfully, there are a whole lot of buildings still out there that can be done. And we particularly like to see more focus on some of the smaller projects to have them, you know, accumulate momentum in communities. But it's interesting that some of the smallest communities around the state, Dover-Foxcroft has one of the most successful projects that's been done. And so in these smaller communities, it's working very well as in the medium-sized and larger communities.
Okay. And I have one kind of technical question, if it's okay. I noticed I went through the report probably a little quicker than I should have, and I'll go through it more slowly, but I saw a reference to partial projects. there's, I think, 56 or something. Maybe getting the terminology wrong.
Do you mean that, yeah, they're the 59 projects in process, basically,
Okay,
who
those
has
are the ones in
finished?
process. I wondered if there was some other, like, yeah, I wasn't sure what that meant. So that means they're in.
So
Sorry.
there's, no, that's fine. So there's actually 3 different stages of a tax credit project. It's literally part 1, 2, and 3. And so, so these projects are in various parts. And at the end of part 3 is when the project is certified and you can claim your tax credit. It's complete. You have your certificate of occupancy. So these projects are in various stages between.
Yeah, I
1,
think
2, and
that
3.
I just looked and it says partially improved. So that means they're in the process of being renovated. Correct.
In some
Yeah,
cases, the building itself is approved. That's part 1. In other cases, the building and the plans for the building are approved. That's part 2. And then sometimes there's a little delay in terms of getting financing together and so forth. So there's, there's about a dozen of these projects that are currently under construction, and then others that are in various stages of the pipeline.
Okay. That's it for my questions.
Great. Thank you, Maureen.
Great.
Well, thank you guys for doing this. I appreciate it.
Of course, we're happy to. We're delighted with our report, so we were happy to share it far and wide.
And thank you for all your coverage, Maureen, of our field and related fields. And wanted to mention that your story on Bill Shanahan, we pulled a quote directly from that story and touched base with Bill and said, can we use this? It's now on the back cover of the report, because it really kind of encapsulates the importance of reuse of historic buildings. So,
good. I'm glad. I'm a historic preservation nerd, and if I had known 30 or 40 years ago that you could actually get a job in it, maybe I would be doing that instead of this.
It's not too late, Maureen, but we do appreciate having such a wonderful advocate at Maine Biz. And
yeah, I was going to say, where you are, you're doing
Yes.
great work to advance it as well.
Yeah.
So
I
you're still in it.
Okay.
Exactly. In fact, what the field needs more than anything else is communications. So thank you.
Good to hear. Okay. Well, is that everything then?
I think so. Yeah. And we'll send out an email with this recording, and I think you've already got a copy of the report. So
I do.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Good.
thank you.
All right, great. Thanks. Take care, Maureen.
You too. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, and thank you everyone that's listening to the recorded version of this session. That's the end. Thank you.